explores gender and sexual diversity in the animal kingdom, same-sex behaviors in over 1,500 species, sex-changing fish like clownfish, pregnant male seahorses, dominant female bonobos, homosexual penguin pairs, and more.
You know what's funny? We've been watching these people push this stuff for years now, and you already know exactly what I'm about to say. You already know. Because we've seen it before. We've seen the same pattern, the same playbook. And now here comes Elliot Page with this documentary about animals, about penguins and seahorses and fish that change color. And they want us to believe something that doesn't hold up, not even for a second. But let me back up. Let me actually start at the beginning, because this is where it gets really interesting. Actually, wait. Let me rephrase that. This is where it gets really disturbing, because what we're watching here isn't just a documentary. It's not just some celebrity making a film about nature. It's something much bigger. And you and I both know it. Elliot Page sat down on Democracy Now! That's the show. The one that pretends to be all about truth and justice and giving voice to the voiceless. And Page is talking about this new documentary. This film that's supposedly about gender and sexual diversity in the animal kingdom. And I need you to hear what Page actually said, because the words matter, the framing matters. Page said it explores same-sex behaviors in over 1,500 species. Sex-changing fish, pregnant male seahorses, dominant female bonobos, homosexual penguin pairs, and more. And here's the thing though, when you hear that list, when you hear them rattle off all those examples, it sounds impressive. It sounds like science. It sounds like they've got the evidence. But do they? Do they really? Because what they're doing is they're taking animal behavior, animal biology, and they're slapping human labels on top of it. And they're telling you that this proves something, that this validates something, that this means transgender and non-binary identities are natural, are rooted in nature itself, are unavoidable and beautiful and profound. But is that true? You know it's not. You already know. And I know you know because you're smart. You've been paying attention. You've watched them do this before. You've watched them take words and twist them, redefine them, make them mean whatever they need them to mean in the moment. And the audience. The poor audience sitting there listening to Page. They're supposed to just accept it. Accept that a fish changing sex is the same as a human being transitioning. Accept that a pregnant seahorse is some kind of proof that men can get pregnant too. Accept that penguins pairing up with other penguins means marriage equality is written into the fabric of the universe. But you and I both know that's not how biology works. That's not how nature works. And that's not how reality works. Let me tell you what's actually happening here, because this is important. This is really important. And I need you to stay with me here because the details matter. The documentary showcases real behavioral and anatomical diversity. They're not making that part up. Animals really do some weird stuff. Clownfish really do change sex. Seahorses really do have the males carry the eggs. Penguins really do sometimes pair up with other penguins of the same sex. None of that is a lie. That part is true. But here's where the deception comes in. Here's where they take something true and use it to sell you something false. Because those animal behaviors don't mean what they're telling you they mean. Not even close biologists, real biologists, the ones who study this stuff for a living. They clearly distinguish biological sex from human gender. They don't confuse the two. They don't pretend they're the same thing, because they're not. They're completely different categories. One is biology. One is human culture. One is about reproduction and chromosomes and anatomy. The other is about social roles and internal identity and language. And animals don't have language. Animals don't have internal identities in the way humans do. Animals don't have gender. They have sex roles. They have mating behaviors. They have reproductive strategies. But they don't have gender identity. They don't have pronouns. They don't have a concept of being non-binary. Projecting human-style gender onto them is anthropomorphism. That's the actual scientific word for it. Attributing human traits to non-human animals. And every legitimate biologist knows this. They understand the difference. They don't confuse sex with gender. They don't look at a seahorse and say that proves anything about human society. But the documentary does exactly that. It takes real biological diversity and frames it as debunking binary sex-gender myths. It takes science and twists it into advocacy. It takes nature and turns it into propaganda. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because Page isn't just making a documentary about animals. Page is using this documentary to make a much bigger statement. A statement about people. A statement about politics. A statement about what Page thinks is right and wrong and true and false. And the message is pretty clear. If animals do it, it's natural. If it's natural, it's good. If it's good, you shouldn't question it. You shouldn't push back. You shouldn't say anything that might upset anyone. You should just accept it. You should just nod along. You should just agree that this is beautiful and profound and that anyone who disagrees is a vile loser who's profoundly uncomfortable with themselves. That's what Page said. Actually, that's a direct quote. Page said people who push back against this are absolute vile losers who must just be so profoundly uncomfortable with themselves they can't handle that someone could get to a place of self-acceptance. And I want you to think about that for a second, because that's a very interesting thing to say. Interesting and revealing, because Page is judging people. Judge people who Page says shouldn't be judging people. Page is calling people names, calling them uncomfortable, calling them losers, while asking for compassion and understanding from the very same people. The hypocrisy is staggering. It really is. And you can see it. You can see it plain as day. Page says don't judge others while judging others. Page says we need to be tolerant while being intolerant of anyone who disagrees. Page says this is about love while using language that's dripping with contempt. And you know what? That's the pattern. That's the pattern we see over and over again. They demand acceptance. They demand validation. They demand that everyone else change their language and their beliefs and their behaviors to accommodate this new worldview. But they offer nothing in return. No respect, no understanding, no willingness to even consider that maybe they might be wrong about something. They just lecture. They just shame. They just call anyone who pushes back a bigot or a hater or a vile loser. And it's exhausting. It really is. I want to pause here for a second, just a second, because I need to say something. I need to say it quietly, and I need you to hear it. I look at Elliot Page. I look at what's happened to Page over the years, the surgeries, the hormones, the transformation. And I don't see happiness. I don't see someone who's found peace. I see someone who's struggling. I see someone whose voice sounds like it hurts, who looks gaunt and tired, who seems to be fighting something. And I don't say that to be cruel. I don't say that to mock. I say it because I'm genuinely concerned. Because this is what we're supposed to celebrate. This is what we're supposed to applaud. This is what children are being told is beautiful and profound. And I look at it, and I just don't see it. I see a wounded person. I see someone who is hurt, someone who was probably hurt by men, hurt in ways we don't even want to think about. And then instead of healing that hurt, instead of getting real help, instead of learning to love themselves the way they were created, they were told the problem was their body. The problem wasn't the trauma. The problem wasn't the abuse. The problem was the flesh. And if they just changed the flesh, they'd be okay. If they just cut away the parts that didn't fit. If they just took the hormones and started passing as the other sex, then everything would be fine. But it's not fine. You can see it's not fine. You can hear it's not fine. And deep down, I think they know it's not fine too. But let me get back to the documentary. Let me get back to what they're trying to do. Because this is the part that really matters. This is the part they don't want you to think about. They're using animals to normalize something, to mainstream something, to make something seem inevitable and natural and beyond question. And it's working. It's working on a lot of people. People who don't have time to research. People who trust the celebrities and the experts and the media. People who just accept what they're told because they don't want to be called names. And you know what? That's how it always works. That's how they get people to accept things they never would have accepted otherwise. They make it seem small. They make it seem harmless. They make it seem like just another step forward. Another civil rights issue. Another fight for equality. And before you know it, before you even realize what's happening, the line has moved. The goalposts have shifted. And what was unthinkable yesterday is normal today, is celebrated today, is mandatory today. You know what I'm talking about. You already know. You've seen it with so many things. Marriage, the military, bathrooms, sports, schools, language itself. Every single day there's something new. Some new word you're not allowed to say. Some new idea you're required to affirm. Some new boundary you're not allowed to question. And if you do question it, if you even hesitate, you're the problem. You're the hateful one. You're the one who needs to get with the times. And it's not just about adults anymore. That's the part that really gets me. It's not just about consenting adults making choices for themselves. It's about children. It's about the next generation. It's about making sure they grow up never even knowing there was another way. Never knowing that men and women are different. That biology is real. That some things can't be changed no matter how many surgeries you have. Because if you grow up never knowing that, if you grow up being told that everything is fluid and everything is a choice and there are no absolutes, then you'll never push back. You'll never question. You'll never say this doesn't feel right because you won't have any framework for what right even means. And this documentary about penguins and seahorses and fish, it's part of that project. It's part of that system. It's designed to speak to the youngest minds, to the most vulnerable hearts, to children who are still figuring out who they are and what they believe. And it tells them in no uncertain terms, that everything they've been taught about male and female, about mom and dad, about family and nature, it's all wrong. It's all outdated. It's all just oppressive social constructs that we need to tear down. And the proof, the irrefutable scientific proof, is in the animal kingdom, in the pregnant seahorses and the clownfish and the penguins. It's right there in nature. You can't argue with nature. You can't argue with biology. Can you? But here's the thing. Here's the thing they're not telling you. The same-sex behaviors in animals, they're real. But they're not queer in the human ideological sense. They're not identity. They're not politics. They're not statements. They're just behaviors. Evolutionary strategies. Adaptations. Sometimes they're about social bonding. Sometimes they're about dominance. Sometimes they're just about sexual arousal without reproductive intent. And if you actually read the science, if you actually look at what the biologists say, they don't use the word queer. They don't use the word gay. They don't use the word transgender. They use terms like same-sex mounting, same-sex courtship, same-sex copulation. They describe behavior. They don't assign identity. They don't make moral claims. They don't say this proves anything about human society, because it doesn't. Evolution doesn't care about our moral identity categories. That's the truth. Evolution doesn't care if you're gay or straight or trans or non-binary. Evolution cares about reproduction, about survival, about passing genes to the next generation. And the male-female reproductive binary persists in nearly all cases. Nearly all. That's the science. That's the reality. And no amount of ideological framing can change that. I want to read you something that really lays it out clearly. And I need you to pay attention here, because this is where the whole thing falls apart. This is where their argument collapses. Gender refers to social cultural roles, expectations or internal identity. That's a distinctly human phenomenon rooted in language, self-awareness, and culture. Animals display sex roles like male competition and female parental investment. But they lack gender identities. They lack the internal self-concept that humans have. They don't think about being male or female. They don't agonize over their identity. They don't feel trapped in the wrong body. They just are what they are. And they do what they do. And applying terms like gender fluidity or beyond the binary to animals is where the ideology takes over. It's not science anymore. It's activism. It's advocacy. It's a ridiculous attempt to portray human transgender and non-binary identities as natural and validated by nature. But nature doesn't validate anything. Nature just is. Nature just exists. And nature reveals rich variation in sex behaviors and reproduction. But that variation doesn't undermine the binary. It doesn't abolish it. It doesn't make it arbitrary. It actually reinforces it. Because all of that variation, all of that diversity, it's still happening within a framework of male and female. It's still happening within a reproductive system that requires both sexes to create new life. The exceptions don't erase the rule. They don't prove the rule is wrong. They just prove that nature is messy sometimes, that biology is complicated sometimes. But complicated doesn't mean meaningless. Messy doesn't mean anything goes. And that's what they're counting on. That's what they're banking on. They're banking on the fact that most people won't dig deeper. Most people will just hear seahorses and penguins and think it sounds scientific. Most people will just accept that if animals do it, it must be okay. It must be natural. It must be beautiful. And they'll never ask the obvious questions. Like, why do we need animal proof anyway? Why do we need to validate human identities by pointing to fish? Why can't we just say this is about compassion and personal choice and leave it at that? Why do we have to rewrite biology, rewrite language, rewrite the definition of male and female? Rewrite the very meaning of motherhood and fatherhood. Why isn't it enough to say we don't like this? We don't want to be this way. Why do we need to drag penguins into it? You already know the answer. You already know, because they're not just asking for tolerance. They're not just asking for acceptance. They're asking for something much bigger. They're asking for validation. They're asking for affirmation. They're asking for everyone else to agree that this is real, that this is true, that this is good. And they're not going to stop until they get it. They're not going to compromise. They're not going to meet you halfway. They're going to keep pushing, keep moving the line, keep redefining the terms. And anyone who stands in their way, anyone who says, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Anyone who says, I don't think children should be exposed to this, they're going to be called vile. They're going to be called losers. They're going to be called every name in the book, just like Page did, just like they always do, because that's the playbook. That's what it's always been. And you know what? We're not going to stop either. We're not going to back down. We're not going to let them rewrite reality without pushing back, because someone has to say it. Someone has to point out the emperor has no clothes. Someone has to stand up and say this doesn't make sense. This isn't science. This isn't nature. This isn't beautiful or profound. This is ideology dressed up as education, propaganda dressed up as documentary, and it's not going to fool everyone. So I'm asking you directly, because I think you already know the answer. Do you think they really believe this? Do you think Elliot Page really believes that penguins prove anything about gender identity? Or do you think this is about something else? About trauma, about pain, about trying to find meaning in a world that doesn't make sense, about wanting so badly to be right that you'll twist everything. You'll twist science. You'll twist nature. You'll twist language itself. Just to feel like you're not alone. Just to feel like you're not wrong. What do you think? I want to know. I really do. And I want you to tell me in the comments, because I think this matters. I think this matters more than they want us to think. And I think if we don't start talking about it, if we don't start saying what we really think, they're going to keep getting away with it. They're going to keep pushing this on our kids, on our schools, on our culture. And one day we'll wake up and we won't recognize the world anymore. And we'll wonder how we let it happen. We'll wonder why we didn't say something when we still could. I'm not going to let that happen. And I don't think you are either. I'll see you in the next one.